Do we live in a world where comic book characters actually walk the world? Are they simply fiction or something a little bit more? Tonight, Mysterious Library is joined by Ben Dunn, famous comic book writer, artist, and for my money, one of the most successful independent comic artists and creators in the world today on tonight's Mysterious Library.
Well, welcome everybody to Mysterious Library. We're very glad you can join us. I'm one of your hosts, Dean Bertram, and joining me is the always spectacular Jason McLean. How are you tonight, Jason?
Oh, I'm doing great. Really pumped for the tonight's show because I get to talk about comic books. I get to have my friend Ben Dunn on. It doesn't get any better than that. In fact, let's bring him up. Let him introduce himself. Hey,
Hello.
Ben.
Hey, what's going on, my friends?
Oh, so far so good. So Ben is again. We have a link to everything, to his website below. He created Antarctic Press back in 1985. He has been doing this forever. In many ways, his work in comics. Y'all did some work with Robotech. Speed Racer. You actually worked on the show. Again, this isn't even counting your comics like Ninja High School, Warrior Nun Ariella. We'll talk about all that. But you did work on Exo Squad, which was one of my favorite cartoons growing up. Like, you have been amazing. You've done a lot of very influential work, even though a lot of people may not necessarily know who you are.
Well, yeah, I do whatever it takes to keep me busy.
No, it's true. And uh I like to refer to Ben as the marvelous manga maven, because he's really in many ways you helped to bring manga to the mainstream back in the 80s with your work on Antarctic Press.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I mean, I did my part. I just like I like the art form, and I wanted to share it, and I just did what I thought came naturally, and if it took off, that's probably. I mean, I'm just happy that it took off. To be honest.
Well, again, I could sit here and sing your praises all evening, but I'm certain that they would like to, everyone would like to hear about John Constantine being seen in the real world. Normally we have a section, Ben, where we talk about, we call it the hot off the presses section. We talk about a paranormal or cryptozoological book coming out. But since you're our first guest on this show, you're the first guest we've ever had.
I'm
Could
honored.
would you be so kind as to let people know where they can find the beautiful books from Antarctic Press, and maybe what may be coming out in the next week or so?
We have most of our books can be bought at your local comics dealer. Um, we go through Diamond for most of our books. We also have several crowdfunding projects. I don't really control that, So whatever they do, they just do on their own. But I edit our monthly anthologies, with the only exception being horror comics. That's edited by Brian Denham. But I do edit Exciting Comics, Jungle Comics, Planet Comics, and Manga Z. I also write and draw Ninja High School, and we're putting out a new anthology is fantasy based. Sword and sorcery, that kind of stuff.
In people may not necessarily understand what I'm about to say. I know people are like, well, hold on, I've never heard of him. How is he one of the most successful independent comics? And it's like, Jason, why are you saying that? Were you just blowing smoke because he's your friend? No, let me tell you why. Sure, there are, we can talk about, Laird and Miller for TMNT and all that. And there's a lot of individuals, but what people don't get, you created Antarctic Comics in 1985. And you were one of the earliest independent distributors in Diamond. For people who don't know, Diamond is sort of the comic industry standard for distribution, and is now, well, for the longest time was the only, because there used to be other distributors, then it just came down to Diamond for the longest time. You've never lost your distribution through Diamond. Like people don't understand how impressive that is in this industry. You have been a constant force in the industry since 1985, and you've done it all independently. You don't have these other big, you don't have a Disney backing you up. You don't have a Warner Brothers backing you up. You did it yourself.
Yeah, well, it's I guess we were just tenacious. We just kept at it. That's one of the things that has been a secret to our survival, is just we just keep going. We just try to keep going. Now, one of the advantages we had was that we actually had people who were willing to write and draw. I mean, I write and draw my own stuff, so I was basically able to produce material for the company, if nothing else, is just to keep material coming out, because that's really the secret to any successful venture, is that you have to come up with product that people are willing to buy, and as long as you have product that people are willing to buy, you're going to stay in business no matter how no matter what it is. And as long as you're making a profit, then you'll stay in business. That's really what it comes down to. And I guess we were lucky that we came out with product or that people wanted, and were able to sustain us, even to this day.
Disney, well, you know as well as I do, Marvel and DC could probably learn from that right now. That little speech, they should probably hear.
I don't think they have anything to worry about, to be honest. They're owned by people with very deep pockets, so I don't think they have too much to worry about.
Well, they may not, but they're certainly not selling. I've seen their numbers. But let's we'll move on with the actual topic of the night, because I think this is a really interesting topic. But before we go, because and one of the other reasons I thought you'd be great to come on is, so tonight we're talking about instances in a specific article, but I've been reading about this since 1993 in Wizard, right? Alan Moore talked about this. Writers and artists running across the actual John Constantine, it's Constantine, not Constantine, it's Constantine from Hellblazer. He was created by Alan Moore in the Annals of Swamp Thing, and he became a very sort of a popular character that DC and Vertigo had going. He was he's an occultist. He's sort of this occult detective. I have to admit, I really like the earlier works versus what they've done with him lately. They've basically made him a low rent Doctor Strange, but I kind of like the earlier versions, right? But people have recounted actually coming across, like they look and they said, that is not a man dressed up by it. It's not a cosplay. They're actually running across John Constantine in real life. And one of the reasons I thought about you, outside of the fact that it's comics and I like talking with you, is you created Warrior Nun Ariella, which has been translated into The Warrior Nun on Netflix, and they've got season 2 coming out, right?
Yes, November 10th on Netflix.
And one of the of course, the conceit is that you wrote into the comic is that is that the world that the characters live in is a highly supernatural world. They run across actual paranormal materials. These things were real, and they encountered them. And this seems to be what's being described here. There's a quote. Let me read the quote from the 1993 article when Alan Moore was talking to Wizard. I remember this, like I said, I remember when I saw this article, I was like, I remember reading that back when Wizard comics mattered. He said, I was in Westminster, London, and I was sitting at a sandwich bar. All of a sudden, up the stairs came John Constantine. It wasn't Sting. It was John Constantine. By the way, for those who don't know, John Constantine was actually designed to look like Sting at the time, like that. Just put in an overcoat with a short do, but that's what he was designed to look like. So he was wearing the trench coat, a short cut. He didn't even look exactly like Sting. He looked exactly like John Constantine. He looked at me, stared me straight in the eyes, smiled, nodded, almost conspiratorially, and then just walked off around the corner to the other part of the snack bar. I sat there and thought, should I go around the corner and see if he really is there? Or should I just eat my sandwich and leave? I opted for the latter. I thought it was the safest. I'm not making any claims to anything. I'm just saying that it happened. Strange little story. But
Wow.
Since then, he's not the only person who's claimed this. Jamie Delano, Peter Milligan, Brian Azzarello, Garth Ennis, Paul Jenkins. They all have stories of encountering a person that they all claim to be and they'll say this wasn't someone who looked like him. This was John Constantine, and all of them,
and those guys all worked on that comic book, right? Just
Yes.
to clarify for the
exactly. They were writers who had worked on the Hellblazer comic or worked on in some other fashion, and so it seems like he is a very specific character that has been seen in the real world in a way that you wouldn't expect. Like to a point, it's like if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Constantine, because he sort of straddles that world of the the real and the occult. So it's like he's kind of the perfect character to do this. But it's just so strange to have the story be not just one person or a one-off, to have it be numerous writers encounter him.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go, Ben. I'd rather hear from you.
I don't know what to really make of that, to be honest. I mean, if how many sightings have there been so far? I mean, has it been recorded, or does anyone have any actual proof that they've seen him, or they just say, "Oh yeah, I've seen somebody who looks like John Constantine," And I mean,
so far, just the stories. We don't have any blurry photos of John Constantine walking through London, being like
Bigfoot,
like Bigfoot, yeah.
Oh, they're coming. They're coming. After this episode, someone will get a photo of.
Well, I mean, it's not like he has
Constantine.
Unusual features. I mean, to be honest, if you see anyone that looks even remotely like Sting, and if you dress him up, it would be easy to cosplay somebody like that, and easily get mixed up with. I mean, whether or not he exists, I don't know. I don't have enough information to really say. So if did Alan Moore actually say he saw a version of him? Was this before he actually created the character?
No, it was after.
It was after. That's the whole the story that I read. That was from the '93 Wizard.
Yeah, just as a conspiracy theorist, it's quite possible somebody was stalking Alan Moore and decided to dress up like him, and say, hey, maybe he wants to drive him crazy.
Yeah, that's a great messing with Moore. That's hilarious. That'd be great. I hope that is what happened. That'd be fantastic.
I mean, it could be what his rival sorcerer could be casting spells on him, and what's his rival? Is it Neil Gaiman, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Neil
they can be
Neil
having a
Gaiman's.
wizard ward for all we know.
Gaiman like put out an ad in some, in some personal column looking for a Sting lookalike, must be able to travel, and he ships the guy in,
Must be able to
dresses
follow
it.
this old grizzled writer,
Exactly.
comic book
Yeah.
writer everywhere.
You got to wear this overcoat.
Yeah. You must be able to smile conspiratorially.
I mean, it sounds like fun, but it's just like it's hard for me to take it seriously because I mean, all things considered, the character itself, if you are familiar with the comic book, I mean, he looks
Yep.
like an ordinary guy,
Oh, he does.
and so
Yeah.
it really wouldn't be unusual for somebody to, pass for somebody like that very easily. I mean, it's it. And besides, there's been so many different interpretations in the comic. You could probably just make what's that thing where you think you see something, but it's really not.
Pareidolia. Can you have
Yeah.
people pareidolia? Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
You never know.
That's true. I think if you're attuned to expect something, you might be, maybe somebody else would, well, unless they were, I guess, a Constantine reader, they wouldn't have clued in on who it was anyway. So 99.9% of the planet would have had no idea who walked past them. But it is fascinating that the creator of the comic identified somebody he saw, and that the figure walked up to him and gave him, a weird smile before he wandered away. And of course, there's a tradition of things leaping from the minds of creators into the real world. Obviously, the most horrific recent one is Slender Man. I forget we actually know the guy who created the creepypasta, right? We know the individual.
Yeah.
I forget his name.
Right.
But the fact that Slender Man now is one of those entities that has escaped, the keyboard, that has become physically real. But what fascinates me, and I'm going to go down a little bit of a path for a moment here, is that Constantine is part of that broader pulp comic book weird kind of milieu, which has these strange, various kinds of heroes or whatever else. So it's a specific type of character. We're talking about kind of a superhero, really, or somebody who appeared in superhero comics. There was a case of multiple hauntings in a cemetery in Michigan. I think it was Mount Olivet Cemetery somewhere in Michigan, and people were seeing what looked like Superman. They were saying Superman was in that cemetery, right? Super strange, okay? But look who was buried in that cemetery for a minute. We're going to go down a little bit of a path here. This is a grave from that cemetery, okay? That's Tom Tyler. Now, who did Tom Tyler play in the famous 1940s serial?
Oh, he was
He was the original Captain Marvel in the very successful 1940s serial. He also played, I think, the Mummy after Boris Karloff and Cowboys and various other things. But perhaps certainly one of the roles he's best remembered for is that role. So in the cemetery that he's buried in, people are reporting a Superman ghost, essentially. But if most people saw Captain Marvel, you wouldn't identify him as Superman. Like, do you know what I mean? If there was a Captain Marvel spirit flying through a graveyard at night, you'd probably go, that it was Superman. There was a guy with a cape and he was flying around. That would be who you'd think of, because it's a far more obvious, it's an obvious kind of trope that comes to mind. But no, Tyler was buried there. Tyler was Captain Marvel. And nobody put two and two together for a while. I don't think instantly people went, oh, that's the ghost of Tom Tyler. No, it took a while for, I believe, a paranormal researcher to work out this connection. Of course, another very interesting one is there's a house in New York which has been long supposedly haunted by this dark figure with this big black hat. And of course, the author or the creator of this character wrote the famous The Shadow stories when he lived in that house. That house actually was Walter B. Gibson's house, the creator of The Shadow. And so The Shadow's been seen. And it's interesting that we were talking about Constantine, or the various artists and creators seeing Constantine, because John Keel first pointed out way back, I don't know if it was in the 70s in one of his books, I can't remember, it's where I first heard The Shadow story. I think he's the first person who popularized it. And he actually said, was this a tulpa? Was this something that had been created by, by the writer sitting so long in this house, dreaming up stories about the shadow? So, and then I'll throw it back to you guys. But it's interesting. I think there's I tend to believe there's a lot of things which present to us supernaturally the way that we expect them to present, including extraterrestrial visitors, including Bigfoot, including a whole range of things. Anybody who listens to this regularly or my other show on the Untold Radio Network, Talking Weird on a Saturday night, know that's my position. But maybe when there's creators who put all of this additional energy, and not just the creators, millions of people around the world consuming this content, maybe there's real energy somehow. And I'm not saying that in a mumbo jumbo, you kumbaya new age way, but there's something maybe somehow leaks into this universe that we share, and things present themselves in reaction to this presented, or this focus of energy on one character. So yeah, the Constantine thing fits a broader, I think, pattern. I don't think it's a standalone, is my point.
Well,
So-
I don't know.
I do want to get back to, actually, there's an interesting Superman connection to Tom Tyler. I'm going to get to that in a second. But so Ben, I'm guessing you've never had Ariella show up in your house late one night?
Well, no, I can't. I have seen my share of sisters, though. That's for sure. I mean, I grew up going to a Catholic school for most of my schooling life, so I had my exposure to plenty of the sisters, and that may have a little bit to do with my fascination for things like that.
None of the Ninja High School characters ever walked by you while you're trying to buy a sandwich or something?
All the Ninja High School characters are based on people I know. So
Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Well,
I
there
try
you go.
to you know,
Mhm.
when I do stories, I try to actually create characters based on people I know, because those are the best sources of inspiration, to be honest.
So I can expect to show up in a comic one of these days? Is that what I'm
Well, you
hearing?
never know. Someday.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but Captain, the
You're
Superman
wrong.
connection. Well, thank you. Okay, well, we're done there.
No, I just,
So the Captain Marvel story. So Captain Marvel was actually, so originally, the reason it's a DC character now, because Captain Marvel was a real competitor for Superman. DC Comics sued because they said he was too much like Superman. So to
yeah.
Dean's point, the fact that people are saying, "Hey, look at Superman," it's almost support for the idea that
No,
that,
he
uh,
was
he was an
actually
infringement.
outselling Superman.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, the thing is that if Captain Marvel was not a success, do you think they would even care? I mean,
No.
the fact of the matter is that this is way for them to knock out a competitor, you
Yep.
know, because Captain Marvel was outselling Superman, you know, and we can't have that. So
Nope.
I mean, and quite honestly, you know, I think they could have won that case, to be honest. I think they either just had a lousy lawyer, or they just didn't want to go through with, you know, with the expense of a trial. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure by that time, superhero comics were also dying anyway. You know, it was right after the golden age.
Yeah.
You know, World War II was over. I mean, superhero sales were actually diminishing. So they probably felt, you know what, we had a good run. You know, let's just not even bother with it anymore, and just, you know, and they ended up buying Captain Marvel anyway. So they made some money on the side. So, I mean, who knows what the reasoning was for their lawsuit. Now, if I were CC Beck, who was the guy who created Captain Marvel, I would have been pissed, you know, because, you know, that's my creation, and I have no say in its future, because when you work for a company, they take all your rights away. You know, thank goodness we don't have that anymore. But back in the day, that was the modus operandi at the time.
Yeah, look at the terrible Jack Kirby situation. Has that
Yeah,
been
I mean, that
rectified now? I
guy-
think they might have rectified that, didn't they? Isn't
Jack
that
Kirby should have died a billionaire.
Yeah.
Okay, really, he should have.
Mhm.
Okay, he should have not have to. Now, of course, because of that, he kept producing fantastic, you know, material, because he had to keep working.
Mhm.
You know, if he became, I mean, if you think about it, if he had become super rich on just Fantastic Four or whatever,
Oh,
he
yeah.
may have just stopped right there. You know, we would just say,
Mhm.
I'm satisfied. I don't need to do any more. You
Yeah.
know, but because he had to keep working, he kept coming up with all these fantastic characters, you know, that we enjoy today.
Yep. No, exactly. One of my favorite pieces. He actually did a Ninja Turtle for one of the Mirage comics, and it was just like a standalone image, but I loved the image. I just like the idea of Jack Kirby doing doing one of the turtles. Um,
Well, see,
but
that's the thing is that,
Mhm.
that's something that I think is really lacking today in comic books because, every artist back in the day had his own unique style. You could
Yeah.
immediately look at somebody's drawing and say, oh, yeah, that's a Ditko. Oh, yeah, that's a Kirby. Oh, yeah, that's a
Mhm.
Steranko. I mean, I look at modern comics now and I mean, except for a few artists, I
Yeah.
cannot tell one artist from the other. It just like they
Mhm.
all photo ref everything. They all draw in a similar style, and it's just like, what's going on? Where's the style?
Yeah,
Where's
I think of John Byrne as the last great guy in that kind of list of people where you couldn't, when you opened an issue, immediately knew he was the artist. But you're right. Today, you have there's no way of telling who's who.
Oh yeah, I mean the Image guys is probably to me the last great compilation of artists who had their own style.
Mhm.
And I mean I'm not saying that there are artists out there now who have distinctive styles, but they're usually not working in the corporate comics. They're doing their own
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, they are. No, you're absolutely right. Although I will throw, I think one of the again, just because I am a fan, Rick Leonardi is another one of those artists that has such a great style, and it's singular, and that man does not get the praise that he does. He's had such a huge influence, but we're way off topic. So, but back to this idea of these of characters that are being worked on, written, showing again, the ghost of Tom Taylor, apparently, or Tyler, flying around in his Captain Marvel suit. I've actually spoken with several artists who were working again late at night, and traditionally they were working on like monster artwork or monster comics, and they would get this sense. I think this is for me why they got this idea that they knew that they were dealing with Constantine. Kind of goes back to they knew that something was watching them, and they would turn and look out a window or their back door. They had one of those big glass back doors, and the creature they were working on is looking at them
Wow.
through that glass, right? And it obviously they were a little disturbed by this, but it is one of those things that kind of calls into questions like, okay, so are they drawing that creature because the creature was near and they were somehow influenced by that? Or is this thing being conjured by their work, right? I mean, I think that's really the gray area for all this is, are they encountering some sort of supernatural being that's taking the form of John Constantine? Did they somehow will John Constantine into existence, or is this John Constantine figure something maybe definitely not human, but something that exists already, and he's been somehow tapped into, and so that's why these people are seeing him.
I have a possible answer to that, and I'm just obviously this is all just conjecture. Obviously, there's no way.
Is it 42?
There's no way to prove 42. No. We can get to that in a minute if you want to. But what I think is, and it only occurred to me now, the three superhero type characters we talked about tonight. So the Shadow, Captain
Mhm.
Marvel, and Constantine. They're all occult type supernatural. They're all occult or
Yeah.
supernaturally linked characters. Like the Shadow knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men. He has this
Yeah.
kind of way of hypnotizing, and he's certainly almost a figure of the occult, really. Certainly, obviously, John Constantine, that's his whole
Yeah.
shtick. But even Captain Marvel, unlike Superman, who comes from, the planet
Yeah.
Krypton, Captain Marvel gets his powers from this kind of occult way of saying Shazam, and he draws on what did it used to
Mhm.
say in the old serial, like the strength of Hercules, the speed of Hermes, like all of these kind of old occult ideas. He channeled these gods essentially. And the same thing with Slender Man. The same thing when you started to talk about the monsters, then it rammed home the fact you didn't say, I have a friend who was drawing his new idea of Spider-Man, and outside he looked out and there was the new Spider-Man. It was still in that weirder broader occult strangeness. So it's interesting. I'm unaware. I mean, I don't know if it exists, but I'm unaware of anybody seeing the spirit of the Flash. You know what I mean? Or my point is, it isn't these
Yep.
happy kind of heroes that are being. It's the same with Slender
That's a
Man,
good
this
point.
terribly
Yeah.
dark creature.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I only am familiar with John Constantine on a superficial level. I'm seen the movies, with the Ken
Mhm.
Reed ones, and my impression is John Constantine is. I mean, I don't know what inspired Alan Moore to create the character,
Mhm.
but my impression of him is sort of a working man's occultist.
Yeah.
He just sort of like he's the kind of guy you would not pass on a street and not give him a second thought. Because
Yes.
he doesn't wear an outlandish costume. He doesn't wear
Mhm.
anything that would separate him, from anybody else that that you would see on the street. So it seems to me that I mean it. I don't know what when this all started. It sort of reminds me of that clown craze that happened, a few
Mhm.
years back, where everyone saw clowns everywhere, and but I
Mhm.
don't know what this ultimately means, as far as all these sightings are concerned, and is this some sort of promotional gimmick, maybe? Is it just something that Alan Moore just pulled out of his hat just so he could, rile people up? I don't know.
I like the idea of Neil Gaiman running around hiring John
Yeah, I like
Constantine
that too.
lookalikes to terrorize other writers.
It makes sense.
That's my favorite theory. But of course, Moore's an occultist as well, right? So if
Yeah.
anybody's going to channel up something, if we believe in this stuff or we give this stuff any potential of being real, then
Mhm.
potentially somebody like Moore might have added a little bit more of magic to the recipe, and
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe he's just having fun with us. Who knows?
maybe.
right. And again, it's like again, this is one of those things that I think often enough doesn't get explored. It's like how much of this is just maybe he's playing with us because Moore likes to. He was the troll. He was one. We'd have called him a troll today. But Alan Moore likes to troll people. Like he just absolutely does. So it's like, what if there is this like inside gag of all these people where it's like, okay, so this is the story you're going to tell, right? And so again, maybe it's promotional, maybe it's an inside joke, like the aristocrats joke. It could be, is this thing real? Who knows if it's a real phenomena or not? But it does, to Dean's point, it does, and again to the stories I've told, it does seem to connect to some of this larger mythos of beings or creatures of public fare being seen in these supposedly fictional characters being seen in the real world. Maybe it's the ghost of something, maybe it's a tulpa. For those who may be new or are unaware of what a tulpa is, John Keel popularized it, but he didn't come up with the idea. It comes out of Hinduism, if I recall. Is that correct, Dean? You're the one who has the UFO doctorate.
Yeah, it's an older idea. I think it comes out of Tibetan traditions, actually.
Okay, that would make sense.
But anyway, it's somewhere in
Yeah.
that part of the world. But yeah, when I said Keel popularized, I just meant he popularized the story about the shadow. I don't know if Keel popularized tulpas, although he was certainly talking about them back in the 70s when I don't think
Right.
there were a whole lot
Well,
of other people.
I
in the
think he
West
did.
talking about 'em.
That's the things. I really don't see anybody else like in this genre, in this field. Everyone sort of points back to Keel's work on tulpas as the originator for the popularization of the idea. But a tulpa is basically a thought form. The concept is people think about a thing or a concept, and then in the power of our thoughts and beliefs, we create this thing that can eventually have its own life, that essentially has been willed into existence. Smaller versions of this is sort of the idea of sort of grander self-fulfilling prophecies on a cultural level, where everyone sort of believes a thing will occur and then we see that thing occur, right? But this is that idea sort of amped up to 11, where an actual being is somehow manifested out of this collective belief or collective ideology or collective interest. At least that's the idea behind it. And again, Dean and I, we've dissected this idea a lot on both of our shows. And, what does that actually mean? Who knows? But the idea is, so it goes back to this idea. It's like, was this shadow figure that was seen in the house, is that some sort of a tulpa manifestation of the art of the writer's imagination of this? It's not like the stories of the Hat Man are necessarily isolated, just places that the shadow has been seen. So it's sort of like the idea of the Slender Man. Is it that, yes, people use the moniker Slender Man, but is it just that the Slender Man is sort of tied into this other ideal, this other concept? And so it's just, they're putting the name, the Slender Man, on this pre-existing phenomena, or the shadow on this. Again, the Hat Man is a long-standing tradition. That's where this vagary is. I mean, obviously it's paranormal. It's sort of out. We can't object. We don't have the Spookatron 5000 patent pending, to objectively observe the paranormal. So it's like, there's this weird gray area of, are we creating them? Are we channeling them? Are we inspired by them and we're just putting our own thoughts over them? Is it a publicity stunt? Is it a psychological thing? Are these purely psychic, events? We don't really know. We don't know. We don't know if it's the chicken or the egg kind of a situation.
That's interesting. I mean, you do bring up some points. I mean, what is exactly the supernatural anyway?
Mm-hmm.
We have things. We have the hard sciences. We can only believe what we can see or feel or touch.
Yeah.
And then, but there are things that are out there. I mean, if you think of it in the grand scheme of things, I mean, we are all made of atoms, molecules and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Could there, and why were things created out of these atoms? Why did these random bits of energy and atoms come together to create, creatures such as ourselves and life in general? What circumstance did occur that would bring things together to be life,
Yes.
to create thought, so I mean, it does seem to beg the question, well, how did this all begin?
Mm-hmm.
What circumstance came about that brought us to this world as we know it? I mean, if truth be told, if nature had a sense of humor, it would just not do anything. We just be in we just be in a huge universe of blackness and nothing. There'd be no existence. Just the fact that we exist, that we think and we can, and life persists, is a miracle in of itself, in my opinion. So, I mean, how do you explain things like that, strictly on a scientific basis? How can science answer fundamental questions such? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if we were just only interested in just what we can see, feel, and touch, I mean, we would just be animals. Okay, we would just go about daily business, eat, sleep, shit, go, whatever, and not do anything beyond that. But as humans, we've gone beyond simply wanting
Mm-hmm.
just to merely exist. We want to try to strive for more beyond our capabilities, and that's where imagination comes in. That's where the art comes in. It's why people write and create things,
Yes.
so that we can postulate things that go beyond our mere existence, and it's possible. If people see visions of a flying Superman in a graveyard, how can you explain that if they're people that actually have seen it and believe it? How do you explain
Mm-hmm.
that? Is it some sort of energy that has benefits itself? I mean, are people able to leave imprints of themselves long after they've passed? Is their energy aura so powerful that even after their physical forms have, deteriorated, that
Yeah.
somehow their spiritual form, in whatever manner that is, have remained?
I
And
think
that's something that I don't know whether or not science can explain that or not.
I think you made some great points, Ben. And I think the one that resonated the most with me then is how you talk about us being different to animals. God created us in our image, so we are told. And God, of course, can imagine things. He can think about something, then make it so. An animal can't do that. You know, my
Yeah.
chickens who run around my yard aren't thinking, "Oh, I want to build a little patch of vegetables which can grow up and feed me." It doesn't occur to them. And it isn't that animals aren't smart, but they don't have an imagination. They can't. They can think like a predator can think how to hunt. A prey animal can think how to eat, but they don't have the ability to realize a concept that begins in their head and manifest it in the outside world the way we can when we build a house or when we draw a comic book or when we write a story. But maybe it's that imaginal capacity. And there are people like Henry Corbin who've talked about the difference between the small imagination and the big imagination. I think Jung talked about that as well. Patrick Harper talked about
Yes.
similar things.
Mhm.
The idea that maybe there's the imagination we have when people are dismissive and say, "Oh, it's all in your imagination," meaning kind of the little imagination, just the things we daydream
Yeah.
about when we're lying out watching clouds fly over us on a summer afternoon. But there's a different imagination as well. There's an imaginal world. There seems to be a world in the broader history of mystical traditions where we enter and we engage with something else, somehow that isn't this realm, somehow that isn't a totally imagined realm, somehow that's somewhere in between. And maybe that's where creators, people like you, Ben, people like Jason, who's also an artist, maybe even people like me, who's a writer, sometimes we might engage with those more than other people. And that might be, again, the potential reason why these things created by people dealing potentially with dark characters resonate long afterwards. Maybe they have that foot in the imaginal world and they're spending so much time creating things here that it does transpose. And maybe even people who don't spend all their time writing stories and drawing comic books like we do. Maybe people, they have that element in their mind anyway. So they're driving home one night and they see a light in the sky, and all of a sudden it's a flying saucer landing on a field, and little men get out of it and they've stepped into the imaginal realm. It isn't entirely this world. It isn't entirely an imagined world. It's somewhere in between. And I suspect these things like Constantine and the ghost of Tom Tyler, or the manifestation of Captain Marvel, and the manifestation of the Shadow, and the manifestation of Slender Man, all of these things, I think, are somehow forced into this same space by us, perhaps. And again, this is all speculation, but I think we have something to do with the paranormal, and perhaps these images of things which don't stand as our traditional kind of beliefs of what the paranormal looks like. In other words, extraterrestrial beings, or the ghost of old Aunt Edna in the back corridor of the family estate, or the Sasquatch. Perhaps these things which are actually well-known cultural tropes that all of a sudden appear in areas that make sense, whether it's Tyler's grave, whether it's the house of the guy who wrote The Shadow, whether it's coming up to Alan Moore and smiling at him. Maybe that gives us a clue to the bigger phenomenon. Maybe that's the value of these stories, that this is where we can go, that's clearly the imaginal world working. Perhaps it's the same as when somebody has an alien abduction experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've brought up some interesting ideas, and as far as what makes us want to decide to want to create anything out of our imaginations. I mean, as far as I know, as far as mankind is concerned, I don't know how, to be honest, I don't know how far mankind actually goes. I actually think mankind is way older than we think, but I don't have any proof for that. But I do know that as people as a whole, we all are blessed with our own thoughts, our own wishes, our own dreams, our own desires, and we all each have our own. Now, we've gotten to the point now in our society where, for the most part, most of our basic needs are met,
Yeah.
and because of that, we're able to spend time, extrapolating and deciding and imagining other things, to keep us entertained, and that's really what it comes down to, is because we don't want to be bored. If we were to, as a species, I think that one of the worst things that can happen to any of us is that we're just simply, have no reason to exist. You
Yeah.
know, we want to be we want to be helpful. We want to help others. We want to create. You know, we want to share. You know, for the most part. You know, and that's and as creators, you know, we try to let that out and put it in some sort of physical form and share with others. You know, and that's the beauty of things like art and literature and music, you know,
Mhm.
and things like that, because we want to expand beyond our normal bounds. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me that John Constantine, you know, that's an interesting name that Alan Moore
Right.
chose. You know, Constantine was the first Christian emperor, you know,
Yeah.
and John is a everyday, you know, common name.
Yeah.
So he picked a very common name as his first name, and then he picked Constantine, which was is an elevated name because he was the first Christian emperor ever to exist. You know, and
Yes.
so I don't know what thought process he went through, but it must have been a very interesting thought process to put those two together and create the character that he did.
Yeah. The combination of the ordinary and the extraordinary in one human. To your point, Constantine is a very blue collar,
Yeah, it's like a
everyday
blue
kind of
collar
person.
Doctor Strange. You know, if
Yeah.
Doctor Strange was a working man, you know, I would
Mhm.
see that as being John Constantine.
Yeah. No,
And ag-
precisely.
And again, Moore, of course, is an occultist and a practicing magician. So again, who knows what he weaved into that? That might have been very intentional.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
true.
I love what you said there. Something you said about us as creators, kind of combined with what Dean was talking about earlier about how we are created in the image of God. Well, we call God God is the creator, but we are also creators. That's
Right.
part of that
You're
imager
gods.
thing. Well,
Literally, we are gods because we create our own worlds. Now, albeit they're just on paper, you know, and maybe we're lucky, you know, we could see it in 3D as movies or television. But yes, you know, every creator is his own god because he imagines things, you know, from his mind and, you know, puts them in physical form.
Well, but so let me take this again, lowercase g gods, but let me take this creator concept further to something Dean likes to talk about. He likes to throw out. He doesn't necessarily agree with the idea of the oh, I just forgot the word, simulation theory.
Simulation. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I like it as a metaphor, but let's play with that for just 2 seconds. If our universe is essentially created by the thoughts of God, the words of God. He creates this concept, and we get to engage in that in our own small little way. To your point, if our universe is not just this flat material, it's more than just this pen, right? It's not just the material, that there is this higher, broader dimension to our reality, one of imagination, one of the supernatural, then is it possible that in our way as creators, we're not just creating characters that exist strictly on a page? Is it possible that in our engaging of the creative process in some small way, we also engage in to Dr. Dean's point here, this broader imaginative creative process that perhaps these things are taking some form in a way that maybe it's not as localized a phenomena as like a pin or a dog, but maybe it's more non-localized. Like we just had the Nobel Prize go to physicists who sort of who proved that maybe matter isn't as localized a phenomena as we think. What if reality is not necessarily as localized and solid a concept as we'd like it to be? What if reality is a lot more timey-wimey, well, timey-wimey, as Doctor Who would say? What if it's a lot more, what if it's a lot more flexible than maybe we'd like it to be, and that that line between the worlds of wonder and the worlds of the mundane aren't as hard and fast as we like to think that they are.
Well, I mean, that would be great. You know, I mean, you know, that's the beauty of, you know, the human imagination is that we can think of things like that.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I look at my cat and, you know, it's like, what's going in his mind? Okay, in his cat mind, he's just a cat. Okay, but in the human mind, I can imagine myself being a cat, or I can imagine myself being, a supreme being. I could be a
Mhm.
world-eating galactic alien monster. I mean, the thing is that when if you can imagine it, okay, then what thought process are we going through that
Yeah.
we could even come up with something like that? Okay, that's the thing, is that's if it can be imagined, then you should you. I always say that if you have a great story,
Mhm.
okay, that could change people's lives, don't keep it locked up in your head. You know, get it out there and share it with people. Because that's really what it comes down to. That's what we all do as creators. We want to share our
Mhm.
idea. Okay, it doesn't do us
Mhm.
any good if we keep, a beautiful idea locked in your head and never see it release, and
Yeah.
to be shared with others. And that's what we as creators want to do. We want to share our imagination. You know, and if you can come up with weird, outlandish concepts, I mean, that takes us to a new level. It's just,
Yep.
oh, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe that is something I should think about. Maybe that's something I can incorporate in a story, or it's something I can look further into. Maybe I'm a scientist and say, wow, I mean, look at Star Trek. I mean,
Yes.
that's 60s,
Yep.
1960s. They were talking about transporters. They were talking about laptops. They had computer disks. I mean, energy weapons in 1966. I don't think anybody in the world thought, oh, that would never exist. That's just
Mhm.
science fiction, bohunky. But now it's coming to the point where but the show inspired enough people to think, hey, maybe I
Yep.
can develop a transporter. Maybe I can create a computer that you could fit on your lap. Maybe I could come up with a disk that will hold, information. You see, that's what is we all
Yes.
strive for.
Well, and that's exactly what I when you were talking, I was like, you know what, I was going to go to Star Trek immediately because you're right. Stories inspire humanity to do better. They give us new ideas. Uncle Tom's Cabin, most historians agree, helped end slavery. To your point, Star Trek inspired engineers and nerds they're like, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we make this thing a reality? And to a point, we're actually in many ways more advanced than we were in the original series. There are elements that we have that are, again, we don't have warp drives so far as we officially know, and teleportation right now is left to just the quantum realm of information. But beyond those few things, I mean, we've actually managed to better a lot of those things. We have plasma force fields that were these little plasma windows that people are working on that can actually maintain pressure from vacuum. So, to your point, stories inspire people who are transcendental, and then that transcendental element within people reshapes reality.
Yes, exactly. We should want to try to improve humanity with our stories. Whether it's a fable, is an adventure.
Mhm.
Whether it's some a biography or something like that. I mean, it's just the thing about what I love about comics. Okay, as a art form, is that anybody can do it if they really want to. They're not limited by budget.
Yeah.
They're not limited by gatekeepers. They're not limited. They could just take a
Mhm.
piece of paper and a pencil and just create worlds, beyond imagination.
Yes.
And that's what I love about comics. I mean, the written word is great, okay, but there's something about attaching, visuals with text that just makes it special, in my opinion.
You
You
know
know,
what that
yeah,
makes me think of just quickly as well, when you talk about the power of image, a lot of what we're talking about here, a lot talking about the power of imagination, is essentially the underpinning of all magic traditions. The idea that we can exert our thoughts and our will on an external world by imagining it and then doing a process which externalizes that internal reality. And
Mhm.
they think now a lot of the early cave work. I was only watching a documentary about this the other day. They think a lot of the early cave art that we have from various Neolithic, period, well, the Neolithic period in various countries, it's often very deep inside caves where people literally had to almost crawl on their belly, like they were doing something which must have been
Yeah.
secretive to go that far in. And a lot of people now are suggesting in those kind of fields that the cave art we have is part of a ritualistic practice where there was a requirement to make an image of something to literalize the result, whether it was for your god to come down or whether it was for you to be successful on the hunt. So I think you're dead right, Ben. I think the power of the image on top of the imagination driving it home has long, at least on a subconscious level, been understood by mankind, regardless of the reality of it bringing about that kind of realization or not, has long been realized to be somehow potent, more potent than just perhaps the
Yeah.
spoken word is potent, but give it the image as well, and all of a sudden, wow, you've got something cooking.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the earliest cave drawings, what were they? They were drawings. Okay, they weren't letters or anything else or numbers. They were pictures because I think humans knew that it was far easier to convey something with pictures than with words. And words came later, in order for us to communicate more efficiently and more effectively. And but pictures have always been there. Yeah, and that's the merging of pictures and text. That's a beautiful thing. Okay, and that's why I love comics so much because, because I'm not a great writer. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I can come up with stories, and tell a comic book story, but if I had to write a novel, I would totally, utterly fail at that. My ability to draw helps me in conveying, what I want to say, because it's easier for me to draw and to tell you through pictures what I'm wanting to say than it is through words. But of course, anybody who is a wordsmith or a talented writer, I mean, I envy them because they're able to convey, images through words that, that is amazing.
Yep. No, I'm right there with you. I mean, the thing we often forget is, to your point, our first language were images. Art, the written word is important, but the drawn word, these, comics are a language unto themselves. Going back to the comics medium, they are a language. It's not just that they're images. They are done in such a way as to tell a story. You can have an entire comic without words, and it will work. And we will understand it. People who can't speak together because they have two different languages, you can draw and you can use illustrations to convey meaning, and you can have, and they can communicate through these illustrations. This is a long standing, and again, our first, to Ben's point, the earliest languages we had were drawn hieroglyphics. There's many languages that are still like Chinese. A lot of the Asiatic languages have an element of illustration to them. They still retain that. Comics is just in many ways a rebirth of the idea of text and image being the same thing. Now it's still divided between the text bubble, the word balloon and the drawn illustration, but it's combining those two concepts together into its own unique language. It's not just an art form. It is a language unto itself. And there's a lot of power there, whether it's purely a psychological thing, or if we can manifest in the world, maybe it is just about enacting the power within us to change the world around us. Again, the right story changes history. The right story inspires people to do great things. The right story gives people hope when there is no hope to be found. And that is a valuable experience.
Absolutely.
I have the feeling Dean has something to say. I can see it in his eyes. His
No,
beady Australian eyes.
I was just waiting for Ben to reply before I jumped in, as I tend to do. And again, to bring it full circle, perhaps that's the reason that things like Constantine and Captain Marvel's Ghost, for lack of a better term, and The Shadow become apparent in this reality, because sure, the Shadow was kind of like a radio play and written originally, but very soon there was illustrations associated with it which taught us
Mhm.
what the Shadow looked like. We all know the Shadow because of the illustration more than, let's get real, than the old radio plays now. Captain Marvel we know from the series and from the comic books, and of course Constantine
And Elvis.
in is entirely comic. But you see my point. The
Mm.
point is that the
Yeah.
things we're talking about tonight were birthed both by an imagination that put them down as, literal drawings. I mean, these were things these were images
Mhm.
that then were able to both, I suppose, affect us, so we knew what we were looking at anyway way later when we saw it. But perhaps that's the key to some of the things that gave this power. Perhaps the reason gray extraterrestrials became so prominent or so prevalent in reports wasn't so much because of the writings, it was because of film presentations where people could
Yeah.
actually see what they are. And I'm sure the same could be said for all kinds of things, that a writing in a book or a spoken word, while powerful, until you have that attached image, perhaps the ritual isn't complete. Perhaps you need that image before the thing can be birthed outside of the imagination into our reality somehow.
Oh, I
Yes.
totally agree.
No, anytime Ben can draw something, he's down for it. By the way, Ben, the idea, I've seen you at a buffet, so the idea of you imagining a cosmic galactic world eater is not a surprise to me.
Hey
but-
there.
Hey, I do. I love you. Again, Ben, I know you hate when I brag on you, but I can't really remember a time when the work that you were doing in the comic field hasn't somehow impacted my life, whether it was Robotech, Crimson Nun, Warrior Nun Ariella, introducing the world to Fred Perry. You've been, Exo Squad, you have been a consistent presence in the world of many, many people in the comics industry, and you did have a hand in bringing manga to the West in a lot of ways.
Well.
So you, sir, whether you like it or not, you're a hero. You're a damn good person.
No, I just wanted to have some fun, just want to share my love of things with everybody else. I life is rough as it is, and if we can get a little escapism, enter a new world,
Mhm.
with that we provide, and make somebody's day, making them happy, make them entertain them, then I've done what I wanted to do,
And where can people enjoy finding you doing what you do so well?
Oh, why, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
And they can find that at benduncomics.com. And,
Yeah, that's my website. I don't update it very often, but I try to do it every once in a while because, quite frankly, I just don't have
a lot of time.
Well, it's not the time. It's just I don't know what to talk about. It's just I post a lot of stuff on my Facebook with a lot of theories and interesting questions and stuff like that. I only use the website basically so I can put up basic guidelines and things like that that people can go to and check out.
Yeah. Well, again, you can find anything published by, all these wonderful things being published by Anarctic Press or Comics, which again, that's the comic company Ben Dunn so magically created back in 1985 with his brother. You've got stuff like Ninja High School, like y'all aren't doing Warrior Nun, it's a whole story over there. But you've got you're doing all these independent comics, Punchline. You've got again, like you said, Exciting Comics, Manga Z. You've got a bunch of stuff coming out right now, and it's a great time to be a part of. If you want something that's not the corporate, pop culture, just here's the formula, bland, McDonald's of
don't
comics.
Get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I love Marvel and DC back in the day. They were.
Oh
very,
yeah.
Yeah, they were very formative in my early.
But I'm talking about
years.
today. You want good stuff today. You got to go independent, and that is Anarctic Comics. Like y'all have got the best stuff out there. Period. End of story.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I just wish our sales reflected that.
that's a topic for a different show.
I would
but-
kill for even the lowest selling Marvel or DC title numbers, to be honest.
Well, there's a conversation to be had there because we both know some of the insides on that one. But that being said, Ben, thank you for coming on. Dean, sign us out.
Well, thank you everybody for listening and or watching Mysterious Library on the Untold Radio Network. We'll be back next week, same mysterious time, same mysterious channel. So thank you everybody and have a wonderful week.
Thank
Good
you
night.
all. Good night.
Thank you, Ben.
I'm an idiot. That was the wrong one. That was the introduction. Doug is going to fire us eventually. You know that, right, Dean?
Yeah, well, we keep making these mistakes again.
We're
Yeah,
only
you will.
human.
Yeah, speak for yourself. I'm out.